evil science and magic buddies.
Hello and welcome to the Cryptonaut Podcast presents Evil Science and Magic Buddies, the show within the show, the conspiracy of the conspiracies, the Crypto Roundtable. I am Mark Storrs, and with me as always is...
I'm Chris.
And...
Rob Morphy.
Thank you all for joining us, and we have a very special guest joining us this week. This is our very first interview, and Robert, why don't you kick it off with...
A sweet, sweet intro and bio to our very special guest. I shall proceed. Author, journalist, lecturer, and classic Whovian, Richard Freeman is a working cryptozoologist who searches for and writes about unknown animals. A former zookeeper, Richard soon was promoted to head keeper of reptiles, working with more than 400 exotic species from spiders to elephants, but with a distinct preference for crocodilians, a preference that likely fueled, or was fueled by, his fascination with international dragon lore. The melodramatic may call him a monster hunter, but they're not too far off the mark, as Richard has trekked to some of the most far-flung and inhospitable corners of the globe, from Mongolia to Sumatra, from Thailand to Tajikistan, which I'm pretty sure is on Earth, but I can't swear.
I don't even know.
I don't know for a fact. With many stops at exotic locales in between, in search of creatures such as the yeti, the Mongolian deathworm, the giant anaconda, the almasty, orang-pendek, and the Tasmanian wolf, which, by the way, is new to me. I'm a Tasmanian tiger fan. We all are. That's a standard, good, great cryptozoological fixture. The Tasmanian wolf, we're going to have to ask about. He has also written books about cryptozoology, folklore, and monsters, including Dragons, More Than a Myth, Explore Dragons, The Great Yokai Encyclopedia, and A to Z of Japanese Monsters, and orang-pendek, Sumatra's Forgotten Ape. As if that weren't impressive enough, Richard has recently branched out into horror and weird fantasy with Green Unpleasant Land, 18 Tales of British Horror.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. And I'm going to completely mutilate this. Hayaku Monogatari, Tales of Japanese Horror, Book 1.
Oh, I love it.
I'm stoked about that. Currently, Richard is the zoological director for the world's only full-time mystery animal research organization, the Centre for Fortean Zoology, which is based in North Devon, England. His latest work is a two-part overview of cryptozoology and a chronicle of his own expeditions titled Adventures in Cryptozoology, the first volume which will be released May 31st in the United States and in mid-June in Great Britain.
Jeez.
All right, cool. There you have it. Thank you very much. Richard, thank you for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Hello, good evening, and welcome.
Yes.
You got Hayaku Monogatari completely right.
Oh,
You
yeah.
pronounced it perfectly.
Yay, you nailed
I
it.
cannot believe it. You know what? I have a little secret. I'm gonna let people look at how the sausage is made. I put random hyphens where I think it'll make it easier for me to pronounce words, because otherwise it becomes a complete mishmash in my mouth and mind. So
Yeah.
I consider, that's a little tip for anyone else out there that's trying to get through shit they cannot pronounce. That's how you do it.
Hyphens.
Awesome. Well,
Hyphens.
that was quite the intro there, Robert. And yeah, Richard, again,
Wow.
thank you for joining the show.
My pleasure.
So yeah, let's jump right into it and let's get started. So
I mean, I'm going to have to start with the standard initial interview question, which
Yeah.
is, what was it, be it in your youth or whenever you got bitten by the bug, that first, piqued your interest in the unknown in general?
I can answer that in 3 words. Classic Doctor Who.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
nice.
Near and dear to all our hearts. Absolutely.
Totally.
I grew up in the 70s. You see, I was born in 1970. I'm knocking 50. God, I'll be 50 next year. Jesus. Anyway,
Yeah.
We're all old men. We're all
Oh, yeah.
the bearded old men of cryptozoology.
Yeah.
it started way back in 1963, Doctor Who, and it was very good in the 60s, but it peaked in the 70s. The thing about Doctor Who is everyone thinks it's science fiction, and it is to a certain extent, but it's at least as much about horror as science fiction. It's scary and weird in a way that Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica never was.
Yeah.
It's gothic edge to it. So in the 1970s with the great John Pertwee, who was always my favourite, And then Tom Baker later on. You had these bizarre stories, giant maggots crawling out of slag heaps in Wales and infecting people with this deadly plague. These Lovecraftian tentacled aliens that could project their minds across space and animate children's toys and dummies that will come crashing out of shop windows and attack people. There was a great one called The Talons of Weng Chiang set in Victorian London, and it had giant rats tearing people's legs off down sewers, opium-addicted Chinese cultists, and a cyborg ventriloquist doll with the brain of a pig that out into the night to kill people, and he'd kidnap prostitutes and bring them back to his master's lair, so his master, the villain Weng Chiang, could drain the life essence out of.
Well, all right. Yeah, I mean, I started off, I jumped on with Eccleston, actually, and then worked myself forward until about, I think, like Matt Smith era, and then I worked backwards, and been working backwards ever since.
Well, reverse engineering Doctor Who.
Yeah, I really did.
I remember being a kid. It used to play on PBS here, which is just like the public access, not public access, but like the educational station for the U.S., and I would hear that eerie theremin-esque music playing.
Yeah. Totally.
And I would both get a chill that would run down my spine, but also have the burning desire to run inside. And Tom Baker was my first. And that big, and the bravado, because as terrifying as it was, and I absolutely agree with you, Richard, it was easily as much about unsettling images and ideas as it was about science fiction and expanding the mind. But it grounded down with, like you say, almost Lovecraftian just appreciation for the unknown horrors that exist, but it was the bravado. Like, I didn't realize that would become like a standard Doctor protocol, but the way Baker did it and the way he owned it, that was my first experience with it, and that made me always so stoked, because I'm like, all right, yeah, nothing's safe. A lot of the people around him are going to die, but in the end, his swagger and brilliance is going to make them pull through.
Totally.
But you also mentioned that you were also a fan of Kolchak the Night Stalker.
Yes, that would be, along with The Prisoner, that would probably be my second favourite TV show. Kolchak the Night Stalker it only lasted 20 episodes, 2 TV movies, 20 episodes. It was beautiful. It was a work of art. All of the characters were so well crafted. And Kolchak himself, played by Darren McGavin, brilliant. Yeah. Every week he'd go out and find some sort of monster, and his evidence would be destroyed. And his long-suffering editor, Tony Vincenzo, played by Simon Oakland, brilliant. Then the sort of his camp nemesis in the office,
Upton, Updike.
Ron Updike, yeah. The actor is still around, and he still gets kudos for playing that character. Well, Miss Emily, the old lady that covered the flower shows and things. That all these characters were so believable and great.
Oh, it's a wonderful ensemble. I mean, to me, that kind of set the tone for what I wanted the newsroom to be like when I spent some of my earlier years in, local newsrooms doing correspondence work and journalism. It was nothing like that, of course, but that idea of that office next to a elevated train where, you just hammer down the typewriter and drink coffee and get chewed out by your editor. There's something so romantic about it, and all of those characters really brought it to life. Ignoring completely the fact that each week it was a phenomenal monster or paranormal, event that he had to deal with, or extraterrestrial even in a couple. No, and Darren McGavin might be the greatest character actor America's produced. I mean, he was just fucking phenomenal.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So we're along those same routes.
And they remade that. Did you see the remake of that? Holy!
Unfortunately, yes. And the less
it's like
said, the better.
Surgically removed everything that was good about Kolchak the Night Stalker. They surgically removed everything.
I couldn't agree more.
I did not see it.
No, I didn't either.
No, it was a waste of
nothing.
digital from word go.
Good.
So, as far as a general appreciation of things, I totally get pop culture. It was like American shows like In Search of that and Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious Universe, things like that I saw as a kid that kind of piqued my interest. But how did you get a specific interest in unknown animals?
Well, it just came from this interest in monsters. And I was also very interested in natural history all my life. One of my greatest heroes is Sir David Attenborough, who I hope to meet one day. And he had a number of series in the 70s. The first major one was Life on Earth, which was about the evolution of life on Earth, and it was just an epic piece of television. And he did a much smaller studio-based one called Fabulous Animals, which was all about mysterious creatures. And that sort of added into this melange, this mix, that got me absolutely fascinated in monsters. And when I left school, I went straight out of school and became a zookeeper, and I rose to the head of reptiles. So I've always loved reptiles, particularly crocodilians. And I worked in the zoo for a while, and then after that, I was a grave digger for a bit.
Oh, man. Zookeeper to grave digger. There you go.
I'm a bit of a goth as well. When I was younger, I was really slim, and I had hair like Robert Smith. I turned 21, and it all fell out. And I got a beer belly. So I have to go for the sort of grimly fiendish look now, rather than.
It's actually kind of like what Robert Smith looks like right now. Actually,
it's kind of like what Robert Morphy went through too.
Yeah, there you go.
Early bald, svelte never.
So you go from a zookeeper to a grave digger. So then
it's a great resume. You got
it.
Actually,
that's perfect. That's
then I went off to university because I thought, I'll go and get a degree, to back up my practical skills. So I went to Leeds University in the north of England, and I had the most fun 3 years of my life, but the zoology degree was terrible. The books they were using were 30 years out of date even then. These professors were making fundamental errors that would embarrass a school child. They couldn't tell the difference between protoceratops and triceratops. They thought sauropod dinosaurs lived in water habitually. They couldn't tell the difference between a mammoth and a mastodon. They didn't know how many species of crocodilian there were. They didn't know the Latin name of the Tasmanian wolf. There was one guy there, all he knew about was the morphology of periwinkle penises. That's all he'd studied all his life.
Yeah.
I kid you not, you couldn't make it up. Another guy was world's leading expert on dragonflies, but he knew bugger all about anything else. So zoology as it was taught there was absolutely lousy, and I'm still quite suspicious of academia. So I left the university, and how I became a full-time cryptozoologist was I was out hunting the beast of Bodmin Moor, which is one of these big cats that turn up in Britain. And there was a museum called Potter's Museum of Curiosities, which is sadly now defunct. But it was a collection of weird items collected by this Victorian eccentric called Walter Potter. So he would have the head of a man-eating crocodile from India next to a Maori axe, next to a model of a church built entirely out of pigeon feathers, and he'd have stuffed guinea pigs playing cricket, stuffed squirrels playing cards, all this weird. Now, in the foyer of this museum, there was a little magazine called Animals and Men. It wasn't as rude as it sounded. It was about cryptozoology.
Yeah, because that sounds kind of suspect.
Yeah,
that sounds really.
And I just brought this magazine on a whim, read it, thought it was quite good, subscribed to it, started to write articles for it, had some phone conversations with John Downes, who's the man who set up the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and wrote more and more. He said, look, when you finished at university, come down and work for me. So the rest is history. I moved down to Devon, which is in the southwest of England, and I became the zoological director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology. And since then, I've been to every continent except Antarctica, hunting for things like the Tasmanian wolf and the ghoul and the giant anaconda and the ninki-nanka and all sorts of bizarre creatures.
Well, it's funny that you know what? First off, I'm gonna give our listeners a quick overview of what's going on here because your travel is extensive and impressive. I have been lucky enough to have been called a cryptozoologist by the likes of Dr. Carl Schuker and Nick Redfern, who I know you had many interactions with, and I'm flattered, but I refer to myself as a crypto historian because I'm the kind of guy that wants a whole lot of comfort and almost as much information. I've been in the field, but you are literally like a personal hero in terms of the shit you have managed to put on. So I'm just gonna read this, so that people get an idea. In 2000, you went to Thailand to look for the naga, which is this just colossal crested snake-like creature that is, part of the mythology there, but also obviously cryptozoologic.
Right.
You've been to Sumatra in 2003 and 2004, of course, looking for the orang-pendek. To me, and I'd love to get into that in a second with you, Richard.
5 times now. 5 times I've gone for the orang-pendek.
So how many times again?
5 times.
Oh my God, that is that's brilliant. Larry, let's take a little pause here, because as far as I'm concerned, if something can reasonably be expected to be discovered and kind of set the anthropological and the zoological world on its ear, I believe it's the orang-pendek. To me, there's just such compelling evidence. Obviously, your 5 times to Sumatra must indicate that you agree.
It's a 2-horse race. It's the things that I'm nearest damn it to 100% sure out there are the orang-pendek and the Tasmanian wolf.
So 5 times you've gone there. You must have talked to, I don't know, countless eyewitnesses and explored a lot of things. What is some of the more compelling bits of evidence or even eyewitness testimony that you have encountered on your trips to Sumatra?
Well, I've found footprints and handprints. I've heard the creature calling. I found hair that was examined by Dr. Lars Thomas from Copenhagen University, who's an expert in mammal hair, and he says that it is related to but distinct from the Sumatran orangutan, and he's forced to conclude that there's a new species of large primate in Sumatra. My colleague Dave Archer and our guide, the late Sahar Dimas, both saw the animal from a distance of about 100 feet, squatting in a tree. It clambered down out of the tree and walked away on its hind legs. Dave describes it as being the size of a large male chimpanzee, but walking upright, very powerfully built, hair very dark, like that of a mountain gorilla, strikingly human-looking face, with a brow ridge, and swept back hair on the head, long arms. And every time I've been out there, I've found more evidence. I've always find footprints when I'm out there. And I've talked to so many witnesses that have seen this creature, so many. And our guide, Sahar, had lived in the jungle in Kirinchi Sablak National Park for 14 years, and it was the first time he had seen it when he saw it with Dave, and he wept when he saw it because he'd been looking for this creature. Many years. And Debbie Martyr, there was an Englishwoman called Debbie Martyr who went over there originally as a travel journalist, stayed and ended up being head of the Indonesian Tiger Conservation Group. We spoke to her, and she's seen it twice. She's seen the animal twice.
That's astonishing. Now, from your perspective, what do you think it is? Do you think it is like a proto-hominid, hominoid? I mean, do you have any theories as to where this kind of fits on the spectrum? No, go ahead.
It's the fourth extant species of orangutan. Now, the Malayan Peninsula, Sumatra, Java, and Borneo were all once one big landmass called Sundar, or Sundarland. And on this landmass lived orangutans, and they speciated over 400,000 years ago into the more gracile Sumatran orangutan and the more robust Bornean orangutan. And when the ocean levels dropped and Sundarland was broken up into islands and a peninsula, you had these different species of orangutan, the Bornean on Borneo, the Sumatran on Sumatra. And more recently, there's a new species of orangutan called the Tapanuli orangutan, just discovered 2017. There's only about 500 of them, and the Chinese want to put a great big hydroelectric dam right where they live. So I think the orang-pendek is the fourth living species of orangutan, but it's one that is adapted for living on the forest floor rather than being arboreal. Its fur is much darker. It's usually said to be black or grey, dark grey in colour, and it lives mainly on the forest floor. And when you see its footprints and its handprints are very different to the known orangutans. The handprints are more like those of a small gorilla, whereas the orangutan has very long fingers and a very small thumb. Orang-pendek is totally different. Its footprint has a broad human-like heel, 4 toes at the front, and then an offset big toe. that looks semi-prehensile. So it's not as prehensile as the orangutan's feet. When orangutans come to the forest floor, they tend to walk on the edges of their feet. They have a very strange walk, but the orang-pendek walks habitually upright and on the forest floor.
So you think it's more of a terrestrial branch off, because a lot of the reading I've done has suggested that a lot of people seem to think it's more akin to Homo floresiensis or something, like a more hobbity type thing. But
not at all. No. If you listen to the eyewitness accounts, it's way too robust, way too primitive. Its tool use is, it will use sticks and stones and things, but it doesn't fashion tools. It doesn't make fire like floresiensis did. But weirdly, in the same jungles where people report the orang-pendek, they used to report something called the orang-ardil, which they say was much more human-like. It was smaller than the orang-pendek, less hairy, had hair on the head, but its body was mainly naked. And they said that they hunted using poison bamboo spears. Now, my guide, Sahar Dimas, he said that his father, back in about 1981-82, was in a very remote area of what is now Kerinci Satellite National Park, and they were trading. Him and a friend had gone trading rice for other goods, and they'd made camp, and one of these creatures came out of the jungle and started eating rice from the pot, and Sahar's father's son killed it with a parang, which is similar to a machete. And he said, retaliation, more of these creatures came out of the jungle and speared his friend to death.
Oh my god, shit.
There's been no reports of these since the 80s, whereas orang-pendek, there were reports every year.
Right. That makes, you know what? Now I'm getting a clear picture, because it seems like a lot of the things I've probably encountered were conflations of these two very distinct and separate things, because I had always heard of the orang-pendek using tools and, poison tipped spears, but that absolutely makes a ton more sense.
The orang-pendek, it will throw sticks if it feels threatened, or hurl rocks, but it doesn't fashion tools.
Right, which is something I guess a lot of primates would do. Chimpanzees would do that.
Yeah. One of the differences between apes and hominins is that they both use tools, but apes use objects that they find, sticks, stones and things, like chimpanzees fishing for termites with bits of grass.
Like reeds and whatnot, yeah. No, but they do not fashion tools.
Yeah, exactly. They don't make hand axes or spears or things like that.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, what about you said your second or parallel belief is in the Tasmanian wolf?
The Tasmanian wolf, yes.
Yeah. Now, see, I'm not familiar with this at all. Obviously, everyone knows the thylacine, the Tasmanian tiger.
It is the thylacine. It's the same animal.
Oh, it is the same animal.
It has many names, the thylacine. The Tasmanian wolf, the Tasmanian...
I am just an idiot. We are talking about the Tassie tiger, the thylacine. So whether it's the wolf or the tiger, it is... Well, and wolf makes more sense because they're canine, right? Or at least close to the family.
It's a flesh-eating marsupial. It's not related to wolves or tigers. Its closest living relative is the Tasmanian devil.
You're just trying to make me look bad in front of our listeners at this point, aren't you?
It's actually a marsupial. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a marsupial. It has a backward-facing pouch.
Oh, that sounds cute and horrendous.
It's so it doesn't catch the pouch when it's running through the underbrush. And the males had a pouch as well, and the pouch protected their testicles.
Protect your balls at all costs.
You got
That's right.
it.
That's evolution, baby, right there.
How did they not survive on that principle alone?
So
protect your nuts.
I prefer calling it the Tasmanian wolf than the Tasmanian tiger because it's evolutionarily parallel with the wolf and not the tiger. It's only called a Tasmanian tiger because it's got stripes.
Right.
Oh, gotcha. All right.
See?
Face value, looking at it like, looks like a tiger, but actually a wolf with a sweet marsupial sack. It's cool.
Parallel evolution or convergent evolution. It's when two animals, often on opposite sides of the world, that are not at all closely related, evolve to look like each other because they're filling the same ecological niche, you see.
All right, that makes sense.
That would delight Darwin to no end.
Yeah, Darwin would be super
Darwin knew all
stoked.
about it. Darwin knew all about this. There are lots of examples, like mongooses look very like stoats and weasels and things, but they're not closely related. They have a similar body plan because they're living a similar lifestyle, you see.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Huh.
So can you tell us a little bit about some of the, I mean, you've obviously gone there. How many times have you gone to Tasmania?
Well, 3 times, hoping to go back again very soon.
And what can you tell us along the same lines as orang-pendek about some of your more interesting experiences and some of the evidence and some of the more interesting reports you received when you were there?
I've talked to people, very good witnesses, that have no reason to lie and no axe to grind. And often they'll only tell you their story as long as you swear not to reveal the place that they saw the creature in because they're worried about it. And I talked to an old ex-logger, and he had seen it back in the 1950s, and then his son had seen it just the year before we were there, and he'd even managed to take some film of one of them. And I saw this piece of film, and it showed a dog-like creature around 100 foot away from this camera trap that stands up, and you can see stripes and a long tail, and it turns around and lopes back into the forest.
Wow.
I talked to another guy who was a government licensed shooter, and he goes out and he takes down feral cats. Cats are a bleeding menace. Wherever you get cats, you'll get extinctions. They've been implicated in the extinction of about 28 small mammals, small marsupials in mainland Australia. They totally wiped out the Stevenson's Island rail. They're a bloody plague. They're one of the few animals that I have an actual dislike of. I adore dogs. I can't stand cats.
Oh, jeez. Look at that. What's funny is I'm a huge dog guy, but I recently rescued a cat.
I love cats.
Which is pretty funny because I actually found the cat where I work, and the cat was not feral, but someone had dropped it off, and it was pregnant or whatever. Had kittens, and we tried to save the kittens, but it didn't work. But the cat ended up coming home with me. But she's an absolute. She's like the Richard Ramirez of cats. Like, she kills so much shit, and she brings it to our house. So she's like, "Oh, Dad, look, here's mourning doves."
They
I'm
are
like,
four-legged death machines.
They are, and that's literally. And I mean, and I've actually in the whole Australian thing. I just saw, I think, an article about how they were going to be trying to like mass hunt some of these cats because they are just wiping out all kinds of
big cats.
Yeah, no. These are regular feral like house cats. They're just
geez.
wiping out shit like left and right.
They kill about 60 million small mammals and birds in Britain alone every year.
Wow. Yeah, they're little vicious predators, but
that's what they do.
My cat is
dirty,
cute.
filthy rats. Fine. I'm not about Black Plague Tertiary Edition.
Yeah,
but
no.
there's a lot of other like things like the poor marsupials that you gotta. I have to say I do enjoy my cats.
No,
I do.
me too.
I know.
I know,
All right,
me
well,
too.
that
Richard and I
having
are
been said,
going to be
I
on
get it.
Team Dog.
So apparently it's going to be a little gang war. You
give
and
me-
Richard, me and Chris. I'm gonna concede early because I'm gonna nap.
You give me a proper
sure.
Staffordshire Terrier, and I'm at home, good sir.
Fair enough.
There it is. Perfect.
Anyway, the point is, this guy went out shooting feral cats, and he's licensed by the government to do it, and he gets paid to do it. He had seen the thylacine twice.
Really?
It's once from a car and once when he was on foot. And another guy who ran an arboretum and a garden centre. He said he was driving between Launceston and Hobart, which is the capital, and he'd seen one of these creatures on a country road, and it is running down beside a barbed wire fence, and it was looking for a way to get under the barbed wire fence. And there were other cars stopping and watching, and so this was a multiple witness sighting.
Wow.
Huh. Interesting.
So
None of these people have anything to gain by lying.
right, that's absolutely true.
The animal exists. It's not like something like the Loch Ness Monster. We know it existed up till the mid-30s, and we know that its closest living relative, the Tasmanian devil, because of all the genetic work that's been done on this animal, the Tasmanian devil, we know that they can breed back from populations that are very, very low. They only need about 25 individuals, and they can breed back without any inbreeding. Now, Tasmania is about the size of Ireland, but it only has a population of about 500,000. Most are in the 2 major cities. When you get out to the east of the island, there's just wilderness, miles and miles and miles of wilderness.
So that negates what a lot of people would say, which is, look at the geographic area of Tasmania. How could they possibly have gone unconfirmed for so long? But what you just said, that's the thing. People always forget in this hyper GPS world that there are vast swaths, even on as small spaces as islands. Not that an island the size of Ireland is small. There are vast swaths of uncharted terrain wherein any number of creatures, both presumed extinct and heretofore unclassified, could live. And I'm really glad you pointed that out, Richard.
Absolutely. And another great piece of evidence is there's a guy called Professor Henry Nix, and he developed a computer program called BioClim. I'm just going to take a swig of cider.
By all means.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's better. BioClim was a tool for zoologists, and what it did, it entered in all the data you'd got on a certain geographical area, all the data you'd got on a target species, and it matched the two together, and it would say where within this geographical area would you most likely find your target species. For instance, if you wanted to go and look at white rhinos in Botswana, it would say what's the best place for looking for white rhinos in Botswana, match it together, and you'd have your information. Now, as an exercise, he did this with a Tasmanian wolf, and he found out that there was a 98% match up from where the BioClim program was predicting that the thylacine should live if it was still alive, and where the sightings were coming from. And he said, I'm completely convinced now that it's out there.
That's
and
amazing.
It's been seen by a zoologist, Hans Narding, in 1982. He was over there studying birds, and he saw one of these creatures. He woke up in the middle of the night, heard something moving around, turned his spotlight on, and saw an adult male thylacine from 20 feet away.
Huh.
That's close.
Yeah, that's
I mean, that's
Now,
unmistakable.
when I was over there, I was walking down a very remote trail in the forest in the west of Tasmania. Because, as I said earlier, I think I might have said the east by accident, but no, it's the west of Tasmania that is very, very undeveloped. That's where all the wilderness is. The west of Tasmania has got all the forests and the mountains, and central Tasmania a bit as well. But it's the east. Sorry, I've done it again. It's the west. Sorry, the west.
We're not worried about geography and facts here, sir. You know us better. No, I'm kidding.
The west of Tasmania that is very underdeveloped. And I was in this particular area, and I was walking along this trail in the forest. Now, all the old bushmen that knew the thylacine when it was officially around, and most of them are dead now, but they said it had a smell very similar to the striped hyena. And I know what a striped hyena smells like.
Which is?
A very distinct, musty sort of smell.
Okay.
I mean, they seem kind of cute. I might be talking out of class here, but hyenas, I mean, granted, they obviously are completely deadly, but they seem like they would be kind of,
Yeah, no.
if you could tame one,
they seem
right?
like if you don't value your face.
Hyenas. If you have hyenas from when they're cubs, you can tame them.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
And I bet you Rob and Chris won't let me tame a hyena.
And despite their appearance, they're not closely related to dogs. They share the same ancestors as mongooses and cats, weirdly.
Really? Yeah, that's see?
Another example of convergent evolution. They look like dogs, but they're not dogs.
You can get your cat dog, Rob.
Hey,
There you go.
I've always been a fan.
I love cat dogs.
Yeah, cat dogs rule.
But it's I guess it's my love of Egyptian lore that makes me a jackal man deep down.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
But
no,
that's
I know,
neither here nor there.
I know what you
Yeah.
mean.
Jeez.
Anubis, the jackal-headed god of death,
Yeah.
wasn't
Yep.
a jackal-headed god of death. He was a wolf-headed god of death. The Egyptian jackal is not a jackal at all. Genetics have recently revealed that the Egyptian jackal is actually a small desert wolf and not a jackal.
Huh. Interesting.
Son of a biscuit.
Tiny
See?
desert wolf.
This is why we need guests like you, Richard.
Because we
we are
don't know
swimming
shit about
in a
zoology.
sea of ignorance.
Anyway, we've digressed massively. And I was going along this little trail, and I got this smell exactly like a striped hyena. And it was only on a small piece of this trail, as if what had ever left that smell had recently crossed the trail. and I could smell it. And on the way back, the smell had gone. And I set up camera traps there, but we didn't get anything. So, was it a Tasmanian wolf? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is compelling.
Yeah.
I mean, undeniably compelling.
Totally.
So this is, I mean, you're in the thick of it. You are in the field so often. You're in a lot of these treacherous places. Let's dip over to Mongolia, because I still remember reporting on this on the website Mark and I used to run called American Monsters. And when I found out you were, actually, in the field, I was like, oh, I'm so stoked. So tell us a little bit about what you found there.
Well, of all the places I've ever been to, Mongolia is my favourite. It's just like stepping out into another world. The Gobi Desert, now you think of deserts as being sandy, and some of them are. And some of the Gobi Desert is sandy, but it's so variable. There's bits that look like giant cat litter trays stretching off into infinity, all these little bits of gravel. And then there's other bits that are made out of chips of mica, so it looks like a mirror, a huge mirror stretching off into infinity.
That's surreal. That's that's some Jodorowsky stuff there.
We
like
saw
mirrored
mirages.
deserts.
You've heard of mirages in the desert. We saw them. We saw these things that look like cities and minarets and towers
Really?
in the distance, and it was just an illusion. And what looked like lakes, and it was just an illusion. And one time we were at a remote oasis, and there was a little dust devil building out in the desert. And I pointed out to my friend and said, "Oh, I've got a dust devil over there." It was coming closer and closer, and I said, "It's getting closer now, isn't it?" And we expected it to go around the other side of the oasis. But it got bigger and bigger and closer, and then suddenly it had gone into a full-fledged tornado, a whirlwind.
Wow.
I remember clinging onto the side of this old ex-Russian army vehicle that we had a couple of these that were taking us to the desert, clinging onto it and looking up like Dorothy in the and seeing one of our drivers 20 feet off the ground being spun round and round, clinging onto the shredded remains of a tent.
Oh,
and
Jesus.
It just wrecked our camp, just went through it. And in the time I've took to tell you this, it had gone straight through and disappeared back into the desert.
Did the driver survive?
Yes, he survived that.
Oh, Jesus, thank God. I was like,
I know, I was all
died.
tense now. I was clenching
Holy
my
shit.
teeth like, what happened?
Yeah, wow.
Oh my God, that is craziness.
Place, an amazing place. And we talked to so many witnesses. And we went for about 1,000 miles through the desert, and we talked to about 24 witnesses, some of whom had seen it, some old men who'd seen it back in the 1930s, and a guy about my own age who had seen it just the year before. And they were describing something that looked like a salami or a draft excluder, sausage-shaped brick red thing that it's hard to tell which end is the tail and which end is the head.
Huh.
Kind of like a shingleback.
Yeah, most of them saw it lying in the desert and just shit their pants and ran. And one guy said he'd seen it as a boy when he was tending to the livestock, and he went and told his parents. They got all their livestock, packed up their ger, which is a circular tent they have, and just moved out of the area. It can throw a whole area into a panic, the death one.
Jeez.
So it's just its mere existence obviously has the power to really compel people to react in terror. But can you maybe discuss a little bit of what the differences are or similarities, whatever you discovered between the legend of the, electrified, venomous Mongolian death worm and what the actual eyewitnesses and the people that live in the area experienced and saw over the years?
It's like it's Mongolian whispers. By the time it reaches the west, it's morphed into this monster that's worthy of doing battle with the Doctor.
Yeah.
It could create an electrical blast like an electric eel that could kill a full-grown camel. But when you actually talk to the people over there, they say that's folklore. They call it throwing lightning. They say that's folklore. But they do believe that it's poisonous and it can spit, and they're terrified of it. Absolutely terrified of it.
So what in your best estimation is what they're actually dealing with?
It's one of two things, I think. It's either an amphisbaena, which is a worm lizard, They're a group of sort of sausage-shaped burrowing reptiles. They're not true lizards, they're not snakes, but they're related to both of them. To be honest, they look like big cocks more than anything.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
If you put worm lizard into a search engine, and you'll see what I mean.
Fair
They
enough.
look like
All right, well, Google that at home. There you
big
go.
slithering cocks.
So,
It's an undiscovered one of those, but a large one. Or it's a sand boa. And sand boas are desert-growing,
yeah.
constricting snakes. They're quite small, also sausage-shaped. But in Somalia and Africa, they're so terrified of the sand boa, they call it an apris. They believe it's so poisonous that it doesn't even have to bite you. If you touch it, you'll die. A bit like they used to think about the salamander in medieval Europe. But in fact, it's completely harmless. And I think the same thing has happened with a death worm. I think it's a fairly harmless animal. I don't believe it can spit poison. They say it spits a corrosive yellow saliva that acts like acid. I don't believe a word of it. Nobody who reported it ever saw it spitting. They believed it could spit. They believed it was deadly, but nobody ever saw it do that. So I think it's what Bernard Heuvelmans, the great cryptozoologist, called the mythalization process. Like the gorilla, they used to say that the gorilla would tear branches off trees and beat elephants to death, or go into villages and steal native women to rape. A gorilla's erect penis is about the size of my little finger. It's tiny. Of course, gorillas don't do any of that. They're quite gentle animals, but they exist, but they have these legends attached to them because of their formidable appearance. I think it's something similar has happened with the death worm.
that actually makes a lot of sense. That's always been one of the difficulties, because like you indicated, the first part of the problem, which is by the time the rumors spread to the west or whatever direction they're going, they've morphed into something much more incredible and horrifying. But at the same time, even the legitimate traditional beliefs might not be based completely on reality. The creature is real, but the fears and superstitions that surround it, like you say, like the mountain gorilla or whatever it may be, have been blown all out of proportion. And I guess that's where the legitimate science part comes in, to find, identify, chronicle, and then get the accurate story out.
Yeah.
But sometimes the reverse of that happens. Example, there's a big tree frog from South America called the giant monkey tree frog. And the natives used to say the secretions of this frog will make you invisible, and it will stop you feeling hunger or thirst.
It makes
When
you
biochemists looked at these secretions, they found it had chemicals in it that would negate hunger and thirst, and also mask human scent, making you effectively invisible in the jungle.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
In New Guinea, there's a bird called the pitahui, and the locals said it was poisonous, and there was no known poisonous birds. This was scoffed at for years until they actually did some tests on the pitahui. When it had pecked and scratched people, they got terrible rashes, and they found it did have this poisonous secretion in it.
You know,
The Hero Shrew.
So it's a poisonous bird?
Poisonous bird.
We
from
need
New
those
Zealand.
goddamn Australian cats to take care of that. That's crazy.
That's
A
true.
poisonous
Cats
bird.
versus
That's
poisonous
nuts. So you got
guinea birds.
invisible frogs and poisonous birds? Jesus.
There's a shrew from the Congo called the Hero Shrew, and it's called the Hero Shrew because medicine men will take its pelt and wear it on their belts because they think it infers them with great strength. Because they said that the Hero Shrew, despite being about the size of a mouse, can support the weight of a man on its back. And when they looked at the Hero Shrew, it's got this weird sort of basket-like network of bones growing out of its spine that makes its backbone incredibly strong. And no other shrews have this, and we don't know why the Hero Shrew has it. But the natives were right all along.
And that's the lesson that I suppose needs to be learned over and over again. That stories of indigenous peoples should not be scoffed, like this sort of a post-colonial attitude of just, they're they're ignorant, and I mean that in the classic sense of just ill-informed about zoology. Therefore, everything that they're saying about what's going on around them is steeped in myth and conjecture, when so often, it really is the baseline information tablet you need for the fauna of a region. I would be remiss. I'm gonna jump around here as I often do, but Loch Ness Monster. That was the first thing that fascinated me as a kid. I mean, that was the one that, obviously it gained headlines well before any of us were born.
Right. The surgeon's photo, yeah.
And all that stuff.
Right.
And that's another classic example of something being debunked, I think, on less compelling evidence than it is for the existence. And even though I'm drawing a blank on the name of the guy who did it, the guy who did the debunking actually had a sighting of the monster. So he was trying to say,
he said, "I've seen it. I know the Loch Ness Monster," but no one wanted to listen to him.
yeah. But this is something near and dear to my heart. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the time you spent there and some of your experiences?
Well, I've only briefly been to Loch Ness for a couple of days. It's funny, I've been all right around the world looking for other stuff, but I've only been to Loch Ness for a couple of days.
Well, you know what? We always ignore our backyard. Like, we're literally a hop, skip, and a jump from Lake Champlain, and yet it's negligible. So I understand that.
Yeah, we're not going there anytime soon. Like, it
Completely.
doesn't happen.
But one thing I am curious about, let's take you back to Guyana, 2007. You were there searching for the giant anaconda, the Didi, which is a yeti-like hominid, and I think most fascinating for me, the water tiger, a spotted semi-aquatic flesh-eating mammal. Also, for Bushmen, an unrecorded race of 3-foot pygmies with red faces. So begin wherever you want.
Okay.
But I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
This is one of the few times we got sponsorship. And we got sponsorship off the games company Capcom, because they were releasing a new Monster Hunter game.
You
Oh,
mean
that's awesome.
like
yeah.
Capcom that released like Street Fighter?
I think so. I don't play video games myself. But,
sorry, yeah.
So we went to South America with this guy called Damon Corey, who's a really great guy. He's the hereditary chief of the Eagle Clan Arawak tribe. And we went over to look for the giant anaconda. But we had to go in October because that to tie it in with the release of their game. And the country was suffering from the worst drought in living memory. Even the natives said they couldn't remember it being so dry.
Oh.
And we were out on the grasslands. We weren't in the jungle, we were in the grasslands. And it was murderously hot. And I suffered from heat stroke. My arse got torn apart by these things called vine flies that bites you. And my then girlfriend took a photograph of my arse covered in these bites.
Nice.
Like a giant albino irradiated strawberry.
That's fucking terrible.
That's
That's
you know
pretty
what?
god-awful.
That is a beautiful, beautiful image. A beautifully spoken image, I should say.
Anyhow, we couldn't get out to these remote lakes where the giant anaconda was seen. And Damon Corey said that he was told by some hunters he met, some native hunters, that they'd seen an anaconda so vast that they ran away from it in terror. And he asked them how long it was, and they pointed to a palm tree. It was about 30 feet long, and he said there was a tree about that long lying dead in the water, and the snake was crawling over it, and its head and its tail stretched beyond the end of this dead tree, so it was at least 40 feet.
Oh, that's...
There have been claims of giant anaconda 50, 60 feet long. They call them the Manatora or bull killer, because they said that the gauchos would say in the early days that they would constrict and swallow fully grown bulls. They were so massive.
Ugh, Jesus.
That's
But we couldn't get out to
devastating.
these remote lakes because the rivers were so low because of the drought.
Right. The drought.
So we looked at some more local things, and there were stories of this thing called the water tiger, which people insist is not a jaguar. It's different from a jaguar. They say it hunts in packs. It sounds more like some sort of weird otter.
Yeah, that would be my first instinct too. Sort of like the
Yeah.
Irish Dobar Chew there, the
Yes,
Irish
yeah.
crocodile, which always kind of smacked of otter.
Yes, well, it is. It's the master otter. The
Right,
origins.
A master otter?
Otter.
That sounds pretty. that
the
sounds
Master
pretty cool,
Chief.
actually. Yeah.
Dude, I would be happy to be an
Master Chief
apprentice
otter.
otter at this point.
Yeah, totally.
You know,
No doubt.
fledgling otter.
Totally.
To the max.
Hunting packs, and there was one case of a girl that got killed by one of these things. It comes out of the water and tore her throat out. Then lots of people we talked to had seen these little people.
That's the most fascinating to me. The
These
Bushmen.
little
People, oh my god.
men, and they've got these painted red faces, but they're tiny. They're only about 3 feet tall. And Damon Corrie himself, he said he'd seen one. He was camping out once, and one of the things unzipped his tent and looked in, and it's sort of leering at him. But lots of other people had seen them, and
You do not want to wake up to that. You absolutely do not want
No,
to be
you don't want little
in a
tiny
fucking tent.
people looking at your shit.
It doesn't even matter the size. I
Well,
guess
you
just
do.
a red face painted
Love it.
stranger popping into your tent uninvited.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's Count Succula.
Yeah.
And I also met a real life cannibal, and he was
Whoa.
really nice. He's a really nice guy.
Wait. You met a real life cannibal, and he's a really nice guy.
He's a really nice guy. I sat drinking coffee with him on a ranch.
Ooh,
human
what had
coffee.
happened was that there was a pilot in a plane who crashed up in the mountains, and the pilot's parents sent this man up to see if he'd survived or if he was dead, to find the body and bring him back. He went up into the mountains, found the site of the plane crash. The guy was dead, so he put him in like a big sling, like a blanket, tied him up, put him across his back, and started to go back down the mountain. But like mists came down, and he got lost in the forests and the mountains. And he was up there for days and days and days with no food, so he had to eat part of the corpse.
Oh,
That's
Okay,
legit.
well,
That's some
alright.
Donner Party, soccer
yeah. I
team
mean,
in the
we're
Andes.
not
legit.
talking like Jeffrey Dahmer cannibal here. We're talking about like I gotta survive. I had a job. I'm lost.
or eat the brain of your enemy, gain their knowledge.
Exactly.
It's a different breed of
So,
It's
yeah,
not
but,
like
I mean, that's still
it's not
pretty
like
interesting.
Scandinavian
Jesus.
death metal cannibalism.
No. We're not going into Burzum territory here.
I
But
don't know what he said to the parents when he got down, or if he offered just to take a shit in the grave or something.
no, jeez, yeah.
Oh
What do you
my
like? Yeah, hey,
God.
sorry, but I had to eat Fred.
You know
Like,
what? I
sorry.
would blame owls.
Blame
Whenever there's part of the
most
corpse
everyone
missing,
does
just
blame
go
owls.
those damn
yeah.
owls.
Yeah, totally.
Regardless of whether or not they,
Yeah.
are carnivorous in terms of human corpses.
Right.
That's not relevant.
Yeah, just blame them.
Blame
Just
owls.
blame owls. There you
That's
go,
just
Rob.
that's my way.
Nice.
That is absolutely my way. Richard, this has been fucking awesome. I want to tell the folks about some of the amazing books you've written, and I'm super, super stoked about the ones I haven't read yet, especially this one, The Great Yokai Encyclopedia, an A to Z of Japanese monsters. I'm bringing this up just because I would love it if you could discuss some of the highlights of this really quick. There's just a couple of things we've broken down. There's a special pig that's near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Oh, Japanese mythology is just so bizarre. I don't know where to begin. Japanese monsters are just so unbelievably freaky. They include a miniature flaming pig. It's like the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four.
Johnny
Was a-
Storm.
He was a miniature pig. This will run between your legs and steal your genitals.
Whoa, it'll steal your dick and
I
balls away
expect
from you?
It's a
nothing
dick thief.
less.
Really?
You insta eunuch.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's just one.
That's
Then
just
there's
one.
Marayu, which is a giant upright walking humanoid rabbit that digs up corpses and eats their livers.
Ooh.
Sweet.
That's
There's-
awesome.
There's they're obsessed with hair. So they're obsessed with licking and hair. There's one
Huh.
creature that has a great long tongue and it goes into houses and licks the ceiling.
Oh,
And then there's another creature that looks like Barney the dinosaur if he was possessed by all the demons of hell.
Cool. I like that. That sounds kind of
Great
dope.
chubby thing with horrible eyes that comes up behind you and eats your hair. There's
Yep.
a giant killer sea cucumber that grows out of a girl's knickers as she throws them into the sea.
Whoa.
phenomenal.
Okay.
And there's a type of dragon called Mizuchi that lives in a river. He will shoot his spunk out into the river. And if any women are bathing in the river, they'll become pregnant and have dragon babies.
Whoa, dragon babies. All
Perfect.
right.
No,
Nice.
I wonder if that be qualified as a hybrid species or just a parasite
Yeah,
Well,
really.
what-
feeding on the womb of humans.
According to legend, how close you are to where he shot his jizz is how much dragony your baby will be.
Oh, you're super close. You're fucked.
Science.
Yeah, it's pure science.
That is definitely science.
I love that one.
A woman is close to where this dragon god Mizuchi has shot his spunk.
Boy.
Then she'll have a full dragon baby. But if she's further downstream, she'll have like a hybrid dragon-human hybrid baby.
Where
so this is
reptilians
There's
come
just a
from.
handful of them. There's there's one that's
Wow.
a disembodied horse's head that hangs in a tree and neighs at you and gives you diseases when you walk by.
Oh, and
Oh,
diseases.
what an
I love it.
asshole decapitated
it.
head.
So it's like an excerpt from The
Jesus.
Godfather, but
Yeah, really.
plague it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, that one's a dick.
Yeah, that was a total asshole.
You can learn about this and more in the Great Yokai Encyclopedia and A to Z of Japanese Monsters. Some of Richard's other books include Weird Devon, Dragons More Than a Myth,
Nice.
No.
Explore Dragons, fucking love dragons.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, Richard is just universally responsible for our modern dragon episode, which is just
Oh, yeah, that's all the research
astonishing.
came from him,
I
right?
loved
Yeah,
it.
that's right.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
I've got a weird story to tell you that wasn't in that.
All right, cool.
Let's hear it.
Let's hear it.
I've got a friend called Mike Hallowell, and he's more or less retired now due to ill health, but he was a Fortean writer and researcher. And close to where he lives, in Newcastle, in the northeast of England, there is a bay called Marsden Bay, and literally built into the cliff of this bay, and this cliff's hundreds of feet high, is a pub called Marsden Grotto, and you have to take a lift, or elevator as you call it in the States,
Fucking awesome.
to get down. I've been in this place to get down to this pub. This pub has got some of the pillars from the ancient Lambton Castle on it. It has the Lambton Worm, which was a giant serpentine dragon that in the 10th century laid waste to this area of the northeast. Now, the story goes that back in the 18th century, there's a guy called Blaster Jack, and he worked in a quarry, and he used gunpowder to blast holes in the ground for the quarry. And when he retired, he built himself this cave by blasting a hole in the cliff, and it started a tea room, and it was hugely successful. When he passed away, the next guy turned it into a pub, and this pub was very successful, and it's still there today. Now, Mike said that back in the time of the Danelaw, when the Vikings were in that part of England, they went in great fear of a sea dragon called the Shoni. And they said that what they would do was draw straws, and the person with the shortest straw, they'd be trussed up, their throat would be slit, and they'd throw them over the side of their longships so that the Shoni would devour them rather than attacking the ship. And they said that this went on and on after the time of the Vikings and was done by Scandinavian sailors. And these bodies would wash up in Marsden Bay and all along the coast of northeast England as far as Lindisfarne. And sometimes the bodies would be half eaten and sometimes not, but they'd always be trussed up with their throat slit. And it became sort of a cult, this thing, rather than appeasement, it became like a cult or a worship. And he said that the last body was found in 1928. And they used to use the beer cellar of Marsden Grotto as an impromptu morgue to lay these bodies out, and the last one was in 1928. So if that's true, there was a dragon worship cult making human sacrifices in the northeast of England and well into the 20th century.
Yeah, no, past the first quarter of the 20th
Dude,
fucking
this
century.
is Skyrim. This is real life
Dragon
Skyrim.
cult.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Oh my God.
Awesome.
he said that when he was investigating this, he got threatening phone calls telling him to drop it. Don't go any further.
Really?
Oh,
They were-
indications that the dragon cult exists to this very day.
And he
Yeah.
also claims to have seen this thing. He said he was driving with his family along this cliffside road, and he saw this thing come up out of the water, this great brown hump. And he said he could see it had a long neck and tail under the water. And he said it wasn't a whale or a dolphin or anything like that. And lots of other cars were stopping and looking and watching this thing. So whatever it
Do you
is,
know a
he
time
said-
frame on that?
that would have been about 20 years ago.
Hot damn.
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 So we're talking the cusp of the 21st century.
Yeah, so he's
Dragon cults.
more or less retired from Fortean research due to ill health. But that was one of the strangest stories I ever heard.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
amazing.
Jesus, that's wow, that's nuts, huh?
But I've been in some creepy situations myself. When I went out to look for the almasty in Russia, in the Caucasus Mountains, we staked out this old empty barn, this old empty farm rather. Now there'd been a triple murder on this farm in 1973.
Whoa.
There was an old couple, and the man had got money there. One of his relatives wanted the money. There was an altercation. He got stabbed. His wife stabbed the murderer. Then one of the guy's friends stabbed the old woman, made off with the money, and got caught by the police.
Big
And
fun.
ever since then, it's been closed. But shepherds sometimes hang out at this place. And about 8 years before we were there was a story that these shepherds were on the veranda, and the farmhouse consisted of 3 rooms and an L-shaped veranda running around it. And one evening, the door at the end of this veranda opened, and a 7-foot-plus almasty was there. It walked along the veranda, picked one of the men up, just moved him out of the way. It didn't hurt him. Just moved him out of the way. Went
Right.
to the end of the veranda, jumped off, ran away into the bush. And we went over there with a Ukrainian biologist called Gregory Panchenko and an archaeologist called Anatoly Serendenko. And Anatoly had seen an almasty area, and Gregory had seen an almasty in another farm several miles away in the 1980s or early 90s. He'd seen an almasty in a... And we decided to stake this place out. So we put camera traps around everywhere, and we put out bait, meat, and fruit, and all sorts of stuff. And Gregory said when he had seen the almasty, it was making a weird sort of twittering noise like a bird. And a lot of birds who we talked to said the almasty makes this weird twittering noise. And it's not as massive as the Yeti or Bigfoot. It's about 7.5 feet tall, thick brow ridge, flat nose, long hair, muscular, much longer hair on the head, but more human looking than
Yeah, that's
the
what I'm
Yeti.
saying. I've always heard it was more Neanderthal-like than necessarily ape-like.
Well, the Russians had a commission to study this thing. They took it so seriously that they had a commission, a government commission to study it, and the commission's been resurrected recently. But back in the day, they thought it was a sort of relic Neanderthal. But nowadays, we know more about Neanderthals, and we know that they were very sophisticated. They had fire, they made great tools, they had clothes and art. And if you got a Neanderthal and washed him and shaved him and put him in modern clothes, he could walk down any Western city street, and you might think he was a little bit ugly by our standards, but he'd clearly be a human.
But would blend it, yeah, and obviously the interbreeding revelation changed everyone's perspective completely.
This thing, the almasty, is much more primitive. It doesn't use fire. It has primitive tool use, throwing rocks, using clubs. It doesn't use fire. It doesn't make clothes. So we think it might be an early offshoot of Homo erectus or Homo habilis. Anyway, another swig of cider. There we go. I haven't started on the mead yet. Anyway, we were staking out this old farm. We got the camera traps up, the bait out, and I was there with my friend Adam Davis. You may have heard of Adam Davis.
Of course.
So just first-rate chap, and another great guy, called Dave Archer. He was the guy that saw the orang-pendek. First day in the jungle, first expedition, beginner's luck, see the orang-pendek. Anyway, we'd staked this place out, and about 10 o'clock at night, I was sitting on the veranda, just listening. I got my camera there, and I heard a twittering noise, like a bird would make, but it was 10 o'clock at night, dark, birds shouldn't have been out. And then one of the camera traps flashes, it goes off. And I think, Christ, is that what I think it is?
Yeah.
Then nothing more happens. Got to about 2:30, and we go inside one of the rooms, and we huddle around a stove because it's getting cold to warm ourselves up. And Dave falls asleep on this manky old mattress in there, and myself and Adam are warming ourselves by the fire. And there's a door of about 7 feet tall going into this room, and it's slightly ajar. It's about 3 or 4 inches ajar, and there's moonlight and starlight coming in. And suddenly from outside there's this deep guttural vocalization that sort of goes bum 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 bum, but much throatier and deeper, like something that's got really big lungs.
Everyone's up and alert at that point, right?
Yeah.
Dave is asleep. Dave's in the land of Nod.
God bless him.
I turned to Adam and I said, "Did you hear that?" And he nods. 25 seconds later, something walks along the veranda, and as it goes past the door, it blocks out the moonlight and the starlight to a height of 7 foot plus.
Oh, man.
Whoa.
It's on 2 legs. And I said to Adam, "There's something out there on the veranda." So we grab our cameras, go running out. All we see is darkness and silence. It's melted back into the night, whatever it was. So we do a circuit of the farm and the outbuildings, but we find nothing. In the morning, we check the camera traps, and all we've got is vegetation moving. So was it an almasty? I don't know.
Huh. Interesting.
It wasn't a bear.
Right.
Yeah. Seriously.
It was too tall to be a man. But it moved fast and silent. Whatever it was.
It's compelling. I mean,
Yeah, totally.
it's something.
Hey, I'd be a big fat liar.
mind-boggling.
I'd be a big fat liar. I'd be a conservative, a big fat fucking liar.
Fair enough. Fair enough, man. You know what? Like I say, I have been a fan for years. I think I first saw you, Richard, in like the mid 2000s on History's Mysteries, and you know what? I've really been a follower of your career and your exploits, and we really, really thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And I want to encourage everyone to do what you can to read Richard's books because they are really amazing.
Yeah, totally. Richard, can you tell us about the book you have coming up on May 31st?
Yeah. It's well, what I was going to say is I'd be a big fat liar if I said I saw an almasty, because I didn't. I saw something on 2 legs go past this.
Totally.
Which is what makes you legitimate and not
I don't know what
not
it
like
was.
a stargazing true believer or a damn fool. You're a scientist out there, and citizen scientists. You know, I know it's part of the CFC's, I don't know if it's mission statement, but part of, what you guys celebrate is the idea of Darwin on up, and people going out and, finding out what's going on in the natural world that maybe aren't fully accredited, but are absolutely curious and intelligent. And we thank you so much for, sharing these stories.
Rob, the weird thing is that so few people are interested. Recently I went to Tajikistan to look for a hominin called the ghoul, locally called the ghoul. And whilst we were there, lots of reports of this hominin, but also reports of the Caspian tiger, which was supposed to have been extinct since the late 60s, early 70s.
Right.
And even from a park ranger had seen one of these things and watched it for about 5 minutes, and that was just a month before we got there. Loads of people said they'd seen it. Definitely wasn't a leopard or identified it from pictures. They said they'd had livestock taken by it. People had seen them with cubs. And I wrote all this up when I got back to England and sent it out to every single tiger conservation group I could find. And the silence was deafening. One got back to me.
That is such a fucking tragedy.
One got back to me and said, "This is interesting, but we only deal with the Siberian tiger." So if there's any chance that the Caspian tiger is still around, you would think that tiger conservation groups would be all over it.
It's unbelievable to me that if it's not, de facto, people shy away from it as if it's somehow, as if you're like chasing peanut butter elves or some ridiculous dumb shit.
Peanut butter elves, yeah.
Peanut butter elves is the first thing I could come up with.
My favorite.
Solid.
No, when you have
Sounds good.
legitimate, compelling reason to look into something that is bona fide and you ignore it simply because it's not convenient or you think you might be pooed by your peers, you're just a puss.
The thing is, I don't get paid for this. It's all out of my own pocket, and I risk my life doing it. You see.
Right, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Totally.
It's passion and dedication.
No, nobody's interested. I've been trying to get television interested in this for years and years and years. And we get people say, we want to do this, we want to do that, and then they go away. You never hear from them again. Or they say, oh, we won't finance this expedition unless you can guarantee that we'll find the creature.
Yeah, like that's even possible scientifically.
Yeah, you can't guarantee that. And yeah, I hear you on the TV tip. Robert and Christopher and I have been just strung along by producers and
networks
and executives and the Sci-Fi Channel and MTV for years. So yeah,
it's been a fun couple
I think
decades.
it's a part of the game. Actually, it's how you got to play the game.
Research stolen as well. I've had my research stolen. Back when I was a student, I was contacted by this company called Cicada Films, and they said, we do this series called To the Ends of the Earth, which is about exploration. We hear you're interested in the Tasmanian wolf. You want to get an expedition together. We'd like to finance an expedition and film it. And I said, great, that would be brilliant. So I went all the way from Leeds to London, which is several hundred miles.
Right.
Tell these people everything I knew about the Tasmanian wolf, where to look for it, what to do, what not to do, who to contact. And then I did it all again, a second time. And they said,
Jesus.
oh, yeah, we've just got to check with some people in Australia and then it should be all systems go. And I get this letter saying, oh, the producer said there's too many men in this series. He wants a pretty girl to do it instead. So they sent this pretty empty-headed girl instead of me and used my research. Bunch of cocksuckers.
Yeah, no, we had
that is the story of mass media. Television production is a cesspool.
Yeah, I think MTV saw the three of us and was like, these guys aren't going to work. We need somebody else. So, but Richard, thank you so very much for joining us for this episode of the Cryptonaut Podcast presents Evil Science and Magic Buddies. And again, where can people find your book, which is being released on May 31st?
In the United States and mid-June in the UK.
Okay.
Yeah, just go on to Amazon and put in Adventures in Cryptozoology and you can pre-order it.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, we will put a link to that in the description of this episode. That way people can easily click in their podcast player and link right to it.
I can't wait to read it.
If you ever want me back after I've done another expedition, maybe, I'll come back and talk again.
Oh,
awesome.
It would be our pleasure,
Yeah.
man.
All
Thank
right,
you
man.
so much for taking the time. Honestly, we really appreciate your work and thank you.
Thanks, lads. And it's a great podcast. Stumbled over it completely by accident. Just saw the logo, the robot monster logo. I thought, what's this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well,
That
you know
brings
what?
them
It
in.
was fortuitous, and thank you, man. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for all your work.
Totally. All right, Richard, thank you so much. And again, Cryptonaut Podcast, cryptonautpodcast.com, iTunes, ratings and reviews, leave them there. We got the Instas, the Twitters, and Facebook. Check us out there, and we'll be talking to you soon. Richard, thank you again.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Talk to you.